Want to tell you about the day my son's graduation showed me, in front of 200 people, exactly what I'd been to his mother for 19 years. It started with a chair they forgot to save. It ended with a silence I chose. But before we get there, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? I read every single one. It was a Saturday in May, and I was standing in the bedroom mirror, trying to figure out if my tie was straight. A dark green tie, the one my daughter-in-law gave me 2 Christmases ago, said it made me look sharp. I believed her because I wanted to. My hands weren't shaking. I was 63 years old, and I'd learned to keep still on the outside, even when things were moving fast underneath. My stepson Theodore was graduating from the University of Tennessee that afternoon with a degree in civil engineering, 5 years. I paid for 4 of them. The 5th was a scholarship he earned himself, and I was proud of that one, in a way I can't fully explain. Like watching something you watered for years finally decide to grow on its own. I heard my wife Beverly's voice through the bathroom wall. She was on the phone, speaking low and clipped, the way she does when she doesn't want the conversation to carry. I turned off the faucet. The pipes knocked once and went quiet. I caught the tail end of it. He can sit with the general guests. Theodore wants you next to me, Eric. That's what he wants. A pause. I'll make sure of it. I dried my hands slowly. I set the towel on the rack. I walked out of the bathroom and sat on the edge of the bed with my dress shoes still in my hand. Beverly came in 30 seconds later with her phone pressed against her hip, smiling the way she smiles when she's working hard at it. "You almost ready?" she asked. "Getting there," I said. I didn't mention the call. I wanted to see how far she'd carry it. Let me go back. 19 years back to be exact. I met Beverly Caulfield at a church potluck in East Nashville. September, hot enough that the fans they'd set up in the fellowship hall were just moving warm air around. She was standing near the dessert table with a 7-year-old boy on her hip who kept reaching for the banana pudding. The boy had his mother's eyes and a gap between his front teeth wide enough to whistle through. That was Theodore. His biological father, a man named Eric Voss, was someone I'd hear about in pieces over the years. The kind of man you assemble from what other people don't say. He'd been stationed at Fort Campbell, came and went, then mostly went. Beverly had been raising Theodore alone for 2 years by the time I met her. She made it clear early on. It's just us now. Theodore needs stability. He needs a man who shows up. So I showed up. I was living in a house I'd bought in Brentwood, Tennessee, 3 years before I met Beverly. 3 bedrooms, a deck out back, a half-acre yard I spent weekends learning how to keep. My name on the deed, my mortgage, my father's advice ringing in my ears the way it always did. What you build is yours, Edmund. Don't give away your foundation for a feeling. Beverly never asked about the deed. I took that for trust. Maybe it was just patience. Theodore was in 2nd grade when Beverly and I got married. I drove him to school the first day I could call myself his stepfather. He sat in the back seat with his backpack on his lap. Didn't take it off the whole ride, and I watched him in the rearview mirror, the way you watch something fragile. I made his lunches through middle school, signed his permission slips, sat in the bleachers at his high school track meets, and kept a running list in my phone of his personal records because nobody else was. When he got his driver's license at 16, I was the one in the passenger seat white-knuckling the door handle and calling it teaching. Eric showed up twice a year, sometimes less. He'd roll through Nashville in a truck he changed out every 2 years. Always something lifted, always something lifted. He'd take Theodore to a Predators game or out to eat somewhere Theodore chose, and they'd come back and Theodore would be quietly lit up the way kids get when someone they wanted to love them finally shows up. Eric never paid child support. I know because I once asked Beverly, carefully, and she tilted her head like I'd asked the wrong question. "That's between us," she said. "You're the one who's here, Edmund. That means something." I was the one who was here. For 19 years I was the one who was here. For 19 years I was the one who was here. The drive to Knoxville was 3 hours. Beverly sat in the passenger seat for most of it with her phone angled toward the window. I drove. We took I-40 east out of Nashville, and the sky was doing that thing it does in Tennessee in May, where everything looks like someone turned the saturation up on purpose. Green, so green it almost looked fake. The kind of colour that makes you feel like you owe something to the world just for getting to see it. Beverly put her phone down somewhere around Cookville and looked at me. "He's going to be so happy we're both there," she said. I agreed. I meant it. We parked in a garage 2 blocks from Thompson Bowling Arena. I carried the flowers, yellow roses, Theodore's favourite colour since he was 9. Something about a sunflower his kindergarten class grew from seeds. Beverly walked ahead, heels on the concrete, phone back out. Inside the arena was loud and warm and alive in the way that graduations are, that particular mix of pride and relief that fills a room when people have been waiting a long time for something to finally be finished. I found Theodore's name in the program before I found my seat. Theodore James Voss. Not Hartley, not my name. I'd never been asked. I told myself, standing there in that aisle with the program in my hand, that it didn't matter. A name is just a name. But something in my chest read it differently. Beverly led me toward a row in the lower section. Good seats, close to the aisle so we could see the stage clearly. Then she stopped, glanced at her phone, and said casually, the way you'd ask someone to check if the oven was off, "Actually, honey, do you mind moving back a few rows? I've got seats saved here for some of Theo's friends from his program. They're running late and I promised him." I looked at the row. 6 empty seats. I looked at Beverly. She didn't blink. "Sure," I said. I moved back 4 rows and found an aisle seat. Set the flowers across my knees. From where I sat, I could see the back of Beverly's head and the empty seats beside her and the stage beyond. The seats beside her stayed empty for 15 minutes. Then a man came down the aisle. Tall, broad, hair going grey at the temples, wearing a blazer that fit him well over a shirt that was open 1 button too many. He had the easy walk of a man who expects rooms to make space for him. He sat right next to Beverly. She leaned toward him immediately, said something. He put his hand briefly on her arm. "Eric Voss." He pulled out his phone, turned it toward the stage, took a picture, posted it. I know because Theodore's college roommate liked it and it pushed to my notifications. The caption said, "My boy, engineering degree. Couldn't be prouder," with a photo of the stage he'd been looking at for 4 minutes. I held the yellow roses in my lap and thought about every tuition payment, every advisor meeting I drove 3 hours for, every phone call I took from a panicked Theodore at 11 at night when a project was due and he didn't know where to start. "Just walk me through what you have," I always said. "We'll find the place to start." When Theodore's name was called, he walked across that stage with the kind of posture that tells you a person has decided something about themselves. Beverly stood. Eric stood. They cheered together. I stood too, 4 rows back, holding flowers nobody was looking for. After the ceremony, I made my way through the crowd. Beverly was near the exit doors, hugging Theodore, and Eric was beside them with his hand on Theodore's shoulder and a phone out for a photo. Theodore looked happy, genuinely happy, the kind of happy you can't manufacture and don't want to interrupt. I walked up and held out the flowers. Theodore turned and smiled. "Hey, Pop." He'd called me that since he was 11. Pop. I'd never asked him to. He just started and I never said anything because I was afraid if I acknowledged it he'd stop. He took the flowers and his eyes moved sideways toward Eric, just a flicker. Eric extended his hand to me. Confident grip, the kind that's trying to establish something. "You must be Edmund," he said. "Theo talks about you." I shook his hand. I looked at it while I did. "Took a lot of people to get him here," Eric said. He smiled like that settled something. I let go of his hand. Beverly caught my eye and mouthed thank you with a small, tired smile. Then she turned back to Eric and laughed at something he said. I drove back to Nashville alone. Beverly texted me an hour later. "Theo wants a small dinner with just family tonight. You know how he gets about big groups. I'll be home late. Don't wait up. Love you." I sat in the driveway with the engine running for a long time after I read that. Just family. I was not in that word. I went inside. The house was the way houses get when everyone who fills them is somewhere else. Not empty exactly, just quiet, in a way that feels pointed. I sat in my chair at the kitchen table, the one near the window that looks out on the backyard. I'd built the deck off that window 8 years ago. I knew every board in it. I put my phone face down. I didn't throw anything. I didn't make any calls. I sat there and let the hurt find its level. Let it settle into something that wasn't hot anymore. Something that knew what it was. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about the word family, and who gets to use it, and what it costs to be the one who builds the thing that word refers to and still not be included in the definition. When the sky started going light, I got up. I made coffee in the kitchen. I didn't sit at the table. I stood at the counter facing the window, looking out at the deck, at the boards I'd laid, at the yard I'd kept. By 8 in the morning I had made 3 decisions. By 9 I had started. I called my bank, First Horizon, the branch off Old Hickory Boulevard, where I'd done my banking for 26 years. I asked them to pull every automatic transfer tied to accounts I'd set up for Theodore. The monthly deposit to his checking account, the standing authorization for his car insurance, the co-signer arrangement on his apartment lease in Knoxville. The woman on the phone paused. All of them? All of them, I said. Today. She processed it without further comment. I respected that. Then I called the property management company that handled Theodore's apartment. His lease had my name on it as co-signer, because his credit was thin when he signed 2 years ago. I told them I was requesting to be removed at the earliest date their lease agreement allowed. The woman said she would notify the primary leaseholder. I told her to go ahead. The third call was to a realtor I'd used once before, a woman named Connie Aldridge out of Brentwood. I'd met her years ago at a neighborhood association meeting. She answered before the second ring. I told her I wanted to list the house on Sycamore Trace. She got quiet for a moment. Edmund, you sure? Past sure, I said. I'm clear. She came over the next morning, walked through every room the way good realtors do, checking the water pressure, noting the updates, making marks on her clipboard. She stopped in the kitchen. Beverly know about this? She's celebrating, I said. I'll handle it. Connie looked at me over her clipboard. We can list Thursday if that's what you want. It was what I wanted. Beverly came home the next evening in the loose, warm way people come home after a day that went the way they hoped. She talked about the dinner, about how Theodore had cried when Eric made a toast, about how wonderful the whole day had been. She talked at me for 20 minutes, and she didn't once ask how I was. She didn't notice the 3 files I'd spread across the kitchen table while she was gone. She didn't notice that the fire safe in the hallway closet was sitting on the floor, open, because I'd been going through the documents in it. You're quiet, she said, on her way to the bedroom. Long drive, I said. She kissed me on the cheek and went to bed. I stayed at that table until past midnight, going through every record I've kept for 19 years. Every tuition receipt, every insurance premium, every grocery run, every medical copay, every home repair, every check I'd written with Theodore's name on the memo line because I genuinely believed that's what it looked like to be a father. The numbers told a story nobody had ever asked to read. The offer on the house came in 8 days. A couple from Franklin. He was a physical therapist. She worked in hospital administration. They had twin girls in elementary school and a dog they sent photos of in the inspection report, like they wanted me to know the house would be loved. Pre-approved. Clean offer. Connie called me with the number. They're asking 12 below list, she said, but they want to close in 30 days and they'll take it as is. I thought about the deck, the kitchen table, the chair by the window, the spot I'd always occupied without anyone assigning it to me, and the dinner I hadn't been invited to. Tell them yes, I said. I signed on a Wednesday afternoon in a title office in Cool Springs. The room was fluorescent and cold and smelled like printer toner. My hand was steady until the last page, and then it wasn't, and then it was again. I loaded the truck over 4 nights. I took what was mine, my tools, my father's level that hung in the garage, the photograph of my mother that had sat on the mantel for 12 years, my records, my books, the quilt from the chest at the foot of the bed that my aunt had made for me when I was a boy. I left Beverly's things exactly as she'd arranged them. Every picture, every candle, every decoration she'd chosen for a house she'd never paid a mortgage on. I rented a place in Murfreesboro, 20 miles south, a small house, older, with a screened-in porch that looked out on a stand of oak trees, quiet in the way that feels selected rather than inherited. I sat on that porch the first evening and listened to nothing and felt something in my chest that I didn't have a name for yet. Beverly found out on a Friday afternoon. I know the hour because Connie texted me at 2:08 p.m. She showed up. New owners answered. Police were not called, but it was close. I was at a hardware store in Murfreesboro pricing lumber. I read the text, put my phone in my pocket, and finished what I was doing. She called 11 times. I let 11 calls go. I picked up the 12th. Her voice was a sound I hadn't heard before, and I'd known Beverly Caulfield for 19 years, hot and cracked and disbelieving, like the ground she'd expected under her feet had simply stopped being there. Edmund, what did you do? Where is my house? It was my house, I said. You lived in it. She went several directions at once. Threats, lawyers, the life she'd given me, the years. I listened. When she came to a stopping point, I said, Beverly, you didn't give me the best years of your life. You handed me the bill for them. That's not the same thing. She hung up. Theodore called 40 minutes later. His voice was different from his mother's. Quieter, careful, the way his voice gets when he's thinking while he's talking. Why? He said. Just that. Ask your mother, I said. Ask her who she called the week before your graduation to make sure he had a seat. Ask her who sat 4 rows back in that arena. Ask yourself who she texted that night to say just family. Then call me back if you still need to ask why. He didn't say anything for a moment. I could hear Beverly's voice in the background, sharp and continuous. I didn't know she'd done that, Theodore said finally. The seat thing, I didn't tell her to do that. I believe you, I said. Then why? Because it was my house, Theodore. My name, my mortgage, my 19 years. And when it came time for the picture, I was 4 rows back holding flowers nobody turned around to look for. I paused. You didn't tell her to move me, but you didn't say anything either. The line went quiet. I'm sorry, Pop, he said. I know, I said. That's a start. The mediation was held at an office complex in Brentwood, 3rd floor, a conference room with windows that looked out on a parking garage. I wore a grey blazer. Beverly arrived first with a lawyer, a sharp-faced woman who came in carrying a leather portfolio and immediately began rearranging the chairs. Theodore sat beside his mother. His eyes stayed mostly on the table, and in the back of the room, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed and his blazer from the graduation, was Eric Voss, present, watching, like he'd earned a seat at this table somewhere between a Predators game and a graduation selfie. The mediator was a man in his late 60s, soft-spoken, who read every document before he spoke and had the look of someone who had heard every version of every story and was not going to be impressed or appalled by any of them. Beverly's lawyer opened with abandonment, marital home, constructive eviction, emotional harm. She had a cadence to it, built for a jury that wasn't there. When the mediator turned to me, I set the envelope on the table. I'd had it organised for 3 days. The house at 1140 Sycamore Trace was purchased in my name alone in 2003, I said. 3 years before I married Beverly, I carried the mortgage continuously. Here is the deed, the payment history, and a full accounting of expenditures I made toward my stepson's education, transportation, housing, and living costs over 19 years. I slid the documents across the table. The mediator picked them up, read them without hurrying. Beverly leaned forward. This isn't about money, Edmund. It was when it was mine, I said. The room did something rooms do sometimes when a truth lands that nobody was quite ready for. The air didn't change, but the quality of the silence did. The mediator looked at Beverly over his reading glasses. The property was titled solely in Mr. Hartley's name and purchased prior to the marriage. Under Tennessee law, that constitutes separate property. The sale was legal and within his rights. Eric stepped forward from the back of the room, uncrossed his arms. I'm his father, he said, gesturing toward Theodore. He grew up in that house. I turned and looked at Eric Voss for the first time since the graduation. I took my time with it. Did you ever pay child support? I asked. The easy expression on his face moved around, but didn't find anywhere comfortable to land. Because I have the records of what I covered in the gaps you left, I said. Braces, high school fees, 4 years of university tuition, a car, an apartment cosign, medical expenses. 19 years of the parts of fatherhood that happen on a Tuesday morning and not at a graduation ceremony. Theodore looked up. His eyes were wet, and there was something else in them. Not anger exactly, more like a man seeing a floor plan of a house he thought he knew, and finding rooms he'd never been shown. The mediator closed the file. There is no legal basis to challenge this sale. We're done. Outside, the afternoon was bright and warm, and the parking lot smelled like fresh asphalt from recent work on the road. I stood on the steps and breathed air that didn't require anything from me. Theodore came out last. He stopped a few feet from me. He didn't touch me. He looked like he was working something out. He stopped answering her calls, Theodore said quietly. Eric, a week after the graduation, Mom called him 12 times. He texted back once. I didn't say anything. She thought. He stopped. Started again. I think she thought the graduation was going to be the beginning of something, with him. He shook his head. It wasn't. No, I said. It wasn't. We stood there for a moment in the sun. Not comfortably, not awkwardly, just honestly. I should have said something when she told me to move you, he said. In the arena. I knew something felt wrong and I didn't say anything. No, I said. You should have. I'm sorry, Pop. I nodded. We didn't hug. We weren't there yet, but I looked at him and I saw the 7-year-old boy in the back seat with his backpack on his lap, and I thought, that boy never stopped being worth showing up for. It was just the arrangements around him that needed examining. When you're ready to have a real conversation, I said, I'm not hard to find. He nodded, looked at his shoes, looked back up. Okay? Summer came and the oak trees behind my porch in Murfreesboro filled out and went dark green, and I learned to drink my coffee outside in the morning before the heat settled in. Small adjustments, the kind of life that gets built from decisions instead of obligation. I started going to a men's Bible study on Thursday mornings at a church on Church Street. There was a man there named Harold, 78 years old, retired sheet metal worker, hands like topography, a voice that always sounded like it had just finished deciding something. He sat across from me one Thursday and said, without preamble, "You got something you're still carrying." "Getting lighter," I said. He grunted. "Lighter's not put down." I thought about that for 2 weeks. Theodore texted me in October. "Can I come see you?" I sat with it longer than I needed to. I thought about the track meets, the permission slips, the essays, the 11 p.m. phone calls when a project had no beginning, and I helped him find one. "Come when you're ready," I wrote back. Doors open. He drove down on a Saturday, and we sat on the screened porch and drank sweet tea, and he told me things I think he'd needed to say to someone who wasn't his mother. He told me he'd known for a long time that Eric wasn't the kind of father you could lean on, and that he'd spent a lot of energy pretending that was okay. He told me the graduation had felt like a chance to make Eric real, in a way he'd never had been, and that he knew now, sitting on my porch, that it hadn't been fair to the person who'd been real all along. He didn't say he was sorry again. He said something better. He said, "I want to figure out how to do this right." "That's enough," I said. "That's a lot, actually." We watched a cardinal work through the oak branches for a while and said nothing, and that nothing was the most comfortable thing between us in a long time. Theodore still calls me Pop. I'm not sure what we are exactly. Not the way we were, not strangers, something that's still finding its shape. Beverly and I divorced 6 months after the mediation. Clean and quiet, the way things can be when there's nothing left to argue about. She moved into an apartment in Nashville. Eric Voss, as far as I know, has not been to Tennessee since the graduation. These days I wake up early and make coffee and take it out to the porch before the birds get loud. I've been building a workbench in the second bedroom, solid ash, the kind that takes time to get right. I'm in no hurry. Harold was right. Lighter is not put down, but put down is possible. I know because I've done it, set down the need to be acknowledged by people who had decided what I was worth before they ever needed anything from me. Here is what I know now. At 63, having paid for a life I was eventually asked to leave quietly, you cannot build your way into a person's definition of family. Either you're in it or you're not. And no amount of tuition checks, No number of drive-thrus at midnight, no quantity of showing up on a Tuesday when nobody was watching will change the category they've put you in. What you can do is know your own worth by the work you've done and carry that with you when you go. If you have ever been the one who filled every gap and still been placed in the back row, I want you to hear this. That row says nothing true about you. It says everything about the people who put you there. You don't have to argue to take your dignity back. You don't have to explain yourself to a room that wasn't listening. Sometimes you just stop holding up what was never built for you, and you walk out into air that belongs to you. That's not giving up. That's knowing the difference. Thank you for being here today. Share your story in the comments. I read every one. And if this reached someone who needed it, please share it. You never know whose back row needs a reminder. I still think about that arena sometimes. The way the light hit the stage. The way I stood up 4 rows back and clapped for a young man I'd driven to school, sat with at a kitchen table, talked through 11 p.m. panic with it, and how nobody in the front row turned around to see if I was there. What I've come to understand, sitting on this porch with my coffee and my oak trees, is that the outcome of that day was not random. It was built. Slowly, over 19 years, brick by brick, the same way I built that deck on Sycamore Trace. Beverly made choices. Theodore stayed quiet when he shouldn't have. Eric showed up for the photograph and left when the photographs were done. And I kept writing checks and telling myself that was enough, that showing up financially, practically, consistently would eventually translate into something that couldn't be taken away. It doesn't work like that. I know that now. There's a version of me that blames Beverly for all of it. It would be easy. But what I've had to sit with, honestly, is my own part. I didn't have a clear-eyed understanding of what I was walking into. I mistook someone's need for my stability as evidence that they valued who I was. Those are not the same thing. Wisdom, real wisdom, the kind that protects you, requires you to look at what's in front of you and call it what it is, even when calling it something else would feel better in the short term. I wasn't willing to do that for a long time. What finally moved me wasn't anger. I want to be clear about that. It wasn't wounded pride or the need to make anyone suffer. What moved me was something quieter and more durable. A decision made at a kitchen table at midnight that I was worth more than the role I'd been assigned. That took something I can only describe as a particular kind of backbone. Not the loud kind. The kind that holds its shape in the dark when nobody's watching, when it would be easier to just go upstairs and go to sleep and pretend nothing had changed. Theodore is figuring out how to be a man who sees clearly. I watch him work through it, and I see someone who, when the moment came, chose honesty over comfort. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. The character you build in the moments when you could have looked away. That's what stays. Eric Voss posted a selfie and went home. Theodore sat on my porch in October and told me the truth. Those 2 men made different choices, and they will live different lives because of it. I'm 63 years old, and I'm building a workbench in solid ash, and I drink my coffee outside before the birds get loud. I don't carry what happened on Sycamore Trace like a wound anymore. I carry it like something I learned the hard way and would not trade, because the man I am on this porch in Murfreesboro was forged in that kitchen, at that table, in those 19 years of Tuesday mornings nobody ever acknowledged. The life you live with integrity, even when it goes unwitnessed, is not wasted. It is exactly who you become.